We would now like to welcome our next guest on the Third and 30 podcast, which is Mehek Cooke, attorney, political strategist, and media commentator. Mehek, thank you so much for taking time out of, I'm sure, your busy schedule to join us today on the podcast.
Happy to be with you, Praveen. Thank you.
Let's dive right in. And what we really love to do with our guests is kind of find out about you and your background and kind of your journey to how you ended up where you are today. So if you wouldn't mind, kind of walk us through your journey from being born in India and moving to the United States at a young age, and now the wonderful life that you and your family have created together.
Absolutely. I always say born in India, made in Ohio. I was born in Calcutta. My dad was in the Indian Navy, and he really wanted more opportunities for me and my brother. So we had a comfortable life in India. He was a very high-ranking naval officer, and he left the comfort of our home, family, and decided to restart in America. And I still remember him coming back and telling me and my mom, there are vacuum cleaners, dishwashers, and garage door openers, and the microwave, which was really important to my mother. So I just remember we packed, moved everything that we could in 2 suitcases, and we arrived with $80 in my dad's pocket. And I will have to share this story. My mom would be very upset, but I have to be candid with you. My dad walked into the US with $80. We actually then completely entered after clearing the duty-free store and all of that with 30. My mom loves perfume, and my dad could not say no to her. So we really entered the United States with $30 in my dad's pocket. Yeah, it's true. She doesn't like me sharing that story, but we were really fortunate. My grandparents were actually living in Columbus, Ohio. So we had the opportunity to live with 10 family members, including my grandparents. My dad worked 3 jobs for 7 years straight. And we always make that joke. The naval degree does not really translate to a high-paying job in the United States. So he worked his way up as cleaning hotel rooms to front desk. He'd do a lot of odd jobs as well, security guard. I mean, anything to make ends meet so that my brother and I could be afforded any of the opportunities we were given to in our life. So I'm really fortunate, and I learned a lot of hard work and just work ethic by watching him. And there was never a sacrifice that was too much for me, for my dad to give to me and my brother. So that's how we ended up in Columbus.
That's amazing. I mean, just how, if you don't mind me asking, how did your grandparents end up in Columbus, Ohio?
Sure. My grandmother's brother had decided that he wanted to start a hotel and asked my grandfather if he would help run it. So my grandfather settled in Columbus, and my dad chose Columbus because we have family here. So we were really fortunate to have what we still call today a home base with my aunts and uncles, my grandparents. I'm really fortunate. They're still here and extremely supportive of me and my family.
That's incredible. We mentioned your titles as there are multiple. You probably have your hands dipped in so many different things, but one of them that stood out to us was that you are an attorney, and we want to ask if was being an attorney in law, was that always your passion, and what drove you towards the field, and what does that mean to you now, and how impactful is it being an attorney, and what it means to you?
Absolutely. The law was not a natural path for me. I am innately a helper, and I wanted to figure out ways that I could help people. That was always a goal. And I was really fortunate to be in a family where my dad always said I can do anything that I wanted to do. And some of the stereotypes, we always joke around about Indian culture, but they're true. You're supposed to be a doctor or an engineer, and very rarely do you get to raise your hand and say, I'd like to be a lawyer. And then many years later, I'd like to run for office and still have family support. But I'm genuinely fortunate. I was looking for a way to help people. I really enjoyed public policy. And for me, it was one particular course at Ohio State. I was thinking about medical school and took a constitutional law course. And I realized that there's so much privilege and freedom that we live with in the United States. And I wanted to make sure that I could always be a champion for people that were less fortunate, that did not know how to navigate in a system that can sometimes be extremely complex. And I think the other part of this also is my dad eventually, as I was growing up, started a small business. And I saw the many challenges he went through in his life. And a lot of times it's simple questions that you want to go to an attorney for as a resource. And I wanted to be a resource, not only for him, but other small business owners. So the law was an avenue for me to still stay true to who I was, which was wanted to be a helper, give back to the country and to our community in a meaningful way. And so it was not a traditional path. It took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do, but definitely a rewarding one.
So you have your own law practice now, is that correct?
That's correct. I have pivoted to helping a lot of small and mid-sized businesses in the community. I realized very early on that a lot of companies really don't want to hire a big law firm. And if they do, I think it's amazing. Law firms exist here, they've existed for hundreds of years, but more often than not, you are calling an attorney when you're in trouble. And what I want to be is more proactive for businesses, to be a resource to help them navigate through regulatory challenges. And working in government, I saw a huge opportunity to be an asset for businesses. So I started with the goal of helping a lot of small and mid-sized businesses. And today, as we have had pandemic and unemployment and so many other issues, I also decided to do a lot of pro bono work as well, so that startups or entrepreneurs or businesses that aren't able to keep their doors open, how can I be an asset? And sometimes it is just going through a legal review and contract review, and other times it's being a strategic business advisor for them.
And I would really look at that as some great selfless leadership there. That is you reaching out, trying to help others, trying to build the community together, and way to go for you to have the wherewithal to know that this is a tough time for everybody, and I have something I can do to make a difference. That's awesome to be able to step up and say that in a community and be able to help people.
Well, and I pivot back to why I joined the law. It was to give back in a meaningful way. And there are a lot of people struggling. And I, I mean this with all due respect. I think that we have to sometimes do what I think of as shared services, which is let me be an asset, let me help you. You don't have the ability to pay. And it all doesn't have to be transactional. As I've grown up, I've realized that there's so much in life. It's, I'll give you this if you do this. And for me, I grew up in a relational world where we built a family unit, 10 family members. And as I've continued to grow, I look at this as growing my family in Columbus, Ohio. So each business that I help, each individual that I'm able to, and sometimes it isn't legal advice, it's how do I collect unemployment? What do I do if I'm an independent contractor? How do I restart my business? Loan questions. I don't have all the answers, but I know I can look it up. I can help people get to an individual with a solution. And it really is about giving back today, more today and more now than ever. But for me, it's always been relational.
You know, you just touched base on something that I had 3 conversations about last week at work alone. And it was, I don't have all the answers. I can go get the answers I don't have, though. And that's how I'm going to lead people. That's how I'm going to lead the organization. So thanks for reiterating that, because sometimes at work when I speak and say that, oh, yeah, you just say that all the time. Yeah, yeah. It's like coach speak. Yeah, we always hear that from you. Now they're hearing it from you. So it's real. And that's what they're going to take out of this.
Well, absolutely. You can't have all the answers. And I think true leadership is being humble. It's the ability to say you don't have all the answers, and also the ability to step up and say, look, I made a mistake. And I think those go hand in hand because it helps build trust. And people are willing to respect you. They're willing to give you another chance. And they're actually willing to listen if you're honest, vulnerable, empathetic. I mean, there's so many qualities when I think about leadership, and I'm not scared to say, I don't know, let me find out. I think it actually builds credibility.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. And an interesting thing, as we, I feel like we're diving into servant leadership a little bit now. And that really brings me to this next question, because you're successful as an attorney, helping others, serving a community, providing in some cases for those that might not be able to provide for themselves in this moment of getting answers and getting advice. What then led you down the pathway? And I'll call it the pivot, as you've alluded to a couple times, pivoting into the opportunity to run for the Ohio House of Representatives. And what did you learn through this process?
I did not come to this country thinking I was going to run for office. It wasn't something I even thought about in law school, but I genuinely had the privilege of working at the U.S. Attorney's Office on counterterrorism cases, working for the governor in the state of Ohio, working for the Department of Agriculture on farming issues and policy issues. And a lot of it hinges with politics. And for me, it was what's right and wrong. Not everything needs to be political. How do we help people and how do we move that ball forward? And when I looked at what was going on in the state of Ohio, I genuinely feel there's a great divide and we need more diversity. We need more women. And I still remember looking at all the experiences I've had in my life, and I thought, this is something that will allow me to step up in a meaningful way and to give back to a country that has provided me so many opportunities. And I have said this to so many groups that I've spoken to. I would have never had the opportunity to go to law school, work for the U.S. Attorney's Office on counterterrorism cases, work for a governor, work at the Department of Agriculture as what I was told one of the youngest general counsels. And I keep receiving these opportunities from the great state of Ohio. Why not give back to people? Why not make a meaningful impact and also be a business leader in the community? Because I could tell that we were so fixated on politics and not enough people were fixated on how do we fix this? Instead of the blame game, how do we provide solutions? So I stepped up and I knew it was going to be an uphill battle. I never thought this was going to be an absolute win, but I remember talking to several mentors in my life, and they said, Mehek, if you decide to do this, you have to be all in. And it is one of the most amazing journeys I've ever been through in life. And I would do it all over again, knowing I was going to lose, because the conversations that I walked away with, and I spoke to a lot of Democrats and independents, um, that that helped individuals understand I may have Republican behind my name, but who am I and what do I stand for? So it wasn't just us versus them. There was an opportunity for me to build unity. And I think there's a lot more work to be done in Franklin County in Ohio. And it was definitely a good learning experience in terms of what what people are looking for in terms of leadership. And it's just pushed me to want to step up time and time again.
One of the things that you just went through, and you didn't, you said it in a different way, and I want to bring it back in for a minute because I think it really alludes to something we talked about off air, and it also wraps into this. It's something we talk about all the time, is don't get caught up into a BCD world. And the BCD is about blame, complain, and defend. Blame others for everything, complain about everything, and then defend your actions. And I know there's a political twist to this in the sense of the Ohio House of Representatives. I want to highlight, though, it's awesome to be able to dive down that pathway and hear someone who ran for that position, who believes in what the position can do, and say, guys, we got to come together as a society and talk. We preach this every episode. We got to talk.
Absolutely.
Get the BCD out of here. We need to talk as people and build relationships. So you highlighting that means so much to us. And it also is educational for us to know that, hey, there's people out there in the legal world, the political world, that want to have those same conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you don't generally find somebody who's willing to knock on an opponent at the opposition door, right? If it's Republicans only talk to Republicans, Democrats only talk to Democrats. To build unity and to win, we have to come together. And I still remember, and I did this time and time again, but the first door I knocked on, um, lots of signs, lots of Democrat signs. So I knock on the door, I introduce myself, and this gentleman just starts yelling at me. I'm a Democrat, never going to vote for a Republican. And I allow him for about 2 to 3 minutes to talk anywhere from the president to where this country's going. And then I just stood there and I said, I know you're a Democrat. I saw every single one of your signs, but I'm still standing here. I still want to have the tough discussion because I care about you and your family. And I think through the course of a 10-minute conversation, he quickly realized that I'm solution oriented. We can sit here and we can blame each other. What does that do at the end of the day? You walk away angry. But if you talk about solutions and you take those active steps in terms of how we can help each other, I think you walk away feeling a little energized, motivated, and there's hope. And I still remember this gentleman who was a neighbor who told me that I could come back sometime. And I have kept my relationship with him. And we don't have to agree on 100% of things, but I genuinely believe people are good and they want our families protected. They want safety and security, freedom of speech, to live in a democracy where we respect each other. And I've said this over and over, just be kind, have the tough conversation, but be kind. Life's too short.
I'm
And
so
those,
I'm sorry, Coach. I'm so glad you mentioned that story because we don't hear enough of those in today's world. I think we it's a lot of, like Coach mentioned, BCD. It's a lot of blame, complain, and defend. And I'm so glad you mentioned that story because it's tough when you see these days when you're on the opposite side of something you see, and we always are afraid of what's different, and we dislike change most of the time. And so I think it's so important that there are people like you that are willing to have those conversations and kind of lead the conversations, because I think a lot of the time we are we don't know how the conversation is supposed to go, and I think because of that lack of knowledge, it kind of leads to a bad place. Now, luckily for people like you, you're able to lead a conversation and understand that no matter how, that gentleman yelled at you for 2-3 minutes, instead of getting caught up in that, you understood that there's an ends to this, there's a means, and we're going to reach there, and it takes patience, and that's part of being humble and being that servant leader. And that's why I'm so glad you brought that story, because in our world we deal with that, in the sports world, in the football world, we deal with that all the time, of yelling and shouting, and especially in the football world, it's very tough to find calm minds to bring together. And I think it's so important to have that. So I mean, I'm so glad to hear that story. That was awesome.
Absolutely.
so one thing before I dive into this next question, when we start talking about college a little bit, because we have to hear about college. And
As a Buckeye, absolutely.
yeah, what high school did you go to in the Columbus area?
So I was really fortunate. My mother was a public school teacher, but she actually started in private school.
Oh, okay.
And Praveen can understand this, being in an Indian family, they keep you very close. So my mom, being a teacher in the private school when we first moved to this country, really wanted me in the school system with her. So I went to Village Academy, a small school in Powell, graduated with 21 seniors. So the transition between 21 seniors and the Ohio State University was the most amazing experience. First of all, nobody knew my mother, which was great. So I could at least have a little bit of fun. But also it was eye-opening for me to have so many options and the ability to grow and navigate and pick courses and friendships. And as much as I loved my experience in high school, this was just a whole new world because it was not very isolated. And you get to meet a lot of different people that think and speak differently than you. And so I really enjoyed my experience there.
You're a proud Ohioan. You are a graduate of the Ohio State University. And when we look at all of this, what growing up in Ohio and living here now, what has that meant to you? And also just a couple highlights from college. We need one or two good stories about what happened in college.
Absolutely. I will say that I took Ohio for granted a little bit. And part of it is because I genuinely have a huge family here. And while I really enjoyed my college experience, I also ran away for a little bit for law school, and I'll get to that. But in terms of going to the Ohio State University, the most important part of my college experience was meeting my husband, Michael Cooke. It was my second to third year of college. And so he has remained my best friend and today my husband. So I look fondly at Ohio State and a lot of the memories I had. And in terms of my studies, definitely a growing experience for me. I did graduate in 4 years, but it took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do. I started with a lot of science courses, and I still remember when I told my parents I wanted to go to law school after my constitutional law course, I was a theater major for a year. Now, any Indian parent, theater major, it's not going to go well. So it didn't. And so I spent a year being a theater major so I could take all the acting classes and also get out of my shell a little bit. When you are raised in a small family, you're trying to figure out avenues to grow and to have a voice. And I certainly developed one through theater and being able to come out of my shell a little bit. And then after graduating, I took some time off, and I look fondly at a lot of my experience at Ohio State because I had a lot of mentors even back then. You look at the college campus today, or you even look at your classes, you have 300 to 500 students in it, depending on what class, right? And as I mentioned, I went to a very small school. So I still remember my first day, first class, walked up to the professor and I said, "Hi, my name's Mehek. I just started at the Ohio State University." And my sociology professor looks at me and he goes, "So?" I'm like, "I just wanted you to know my name." And he goes, "I have 300 other students that are just like you, kid." And I made it my mission to make sure that my college experience, even though I was with hundreds of kids, was still unique. So I spent a lot of time with spending time trying to understand how I could be better in academics, spending time with professors, took every opportunity to get internships. And I'm really grateful to those teachers because if you took that extra step, they were willing to invest in you. And it's part of what taught me to always look back and help kids today that are looking for opportunities, because I had so many people take a risk on me or say, "I'm willing to help you." But absolutely the fondest memories. And we don't have to talk about Mirror Lake, but that was part of the college experience.
I'm gonna have to Google that because I've never heard of that before. So being in Colorado, I'm out of tune with some of those traditions, but sounds like something. But
Countryside with football, I think a lot of the players will know.
that's, um, on third and 30, to have you a little familiar, is we have a mantra and it's hashtag drive. And drive is determination, rigor, inspiration, victory, and excellence. And so that is kind of what we use when we're in a struggle. There's a challenge, there's an opportunity, kind of take those steps to find your drive. And it's inevitable that through life we have so many struggles, and we don't have to talk about the game that happened for Ohio State last night, so we won't talk about that adversity. But the biggest thing in life is adversities come and go, and I think the successful people that find their way in life are better because of the adversities that they went through and what they learned from those adversities. So if you wouldn't mind, take us through um, a big adversity in your life, maybe the greatest one you've had, and for our listeners, what did you do to overcome it? What how were you able to get through that adversity, and what did you learn from it?
That's a great question. I can think of a lot of different times that I've faced adversity, but the one that comes to mind immediately is running for office. I think most people know that politics is generally a man's world, and it's really difficult as a woman to raise your hand and run for office. More often than not, when you're a woman, and it's very true, you're asked to run for office. A lot of people will rally around you or say, "We really want you to run." And traditionally, we give a lot of excuses, whether it's family or something going on in our personal life or a hardship. And I was not asked to run for office. I raised my hand and I said, I really want to run. And it was extremely challenging because it is a world where you really have to prove yourself. You have to be able to step up to a lot of challenging moments. And also, you want to be taken seriously. And I think it was really tough initially because in my particular race, there were a lot of individuals that wanted to run for this seat that screened through the Franklin County Republican Party. And I sat back and looked individual after individual that wanted to run. And I kept saying, I can do this, I can finish strong, I can raise the money, but it was really tough to overcome some of just the traditional challenges. There were a lot of individuals that were men in the field that had established name ID or established relationships. And I think as a woman, I'm constantly trying to elevate that we can run, we can win, we can make an impact. And a lot of times we're just not given that voice. So I decided to create a platform so I could help not only run for office, but help other women do the same. But there were a lot of times that I was told I can't. And that's generally been a theme in my life. A lot of people through different parts of my life have said, Mehek, you can't do that. And I think when you hit rock bottom and you start from zero, you're willing to do anything to make something work if you have a greater purpose, right? So when I look at running for office, there were a lot of individuals that said, you can't raise money, you can't knock on over 40,000 doors, you can't survive the scandal that happened at the State House. And what I did was I proved people wrong, and it wasn't through my words, it was through actions. And I just doubled down. I found individuals that were willing to support and help me. I had a couple mentors that I was able to speak to. And honestly, one of my greatest strengths was having my dad, who has always believed in me and always said, the worst that can happen is we hit rock bottom again, and then we'll build. And so I gave 100%, but adversity was every single day. It was waking up and individuals telling me I can't do something, or not being taken seriously because I'm a woman. And it just took a lot of grit and perseverance. And I was extremely regimented. And eventually, through time, through honestly knocking on doors, and then a lot of my own fundraising activity, I was able to prove to people that I did have statewide support. And slowly, the naysayers were on my side. But it definitely, I mean, I start as an optimist every single day, 100%, and you dwindle that down, and then you just have to figure out, how do I put fuel in the tank again? And honestly, it's surrounding yourself by a couple supporters that will guide you and lead you and help you build when you're feeling absolutely down.
You know, John Gordon has a book called The Energy Bus. And what you're describing there reminds me of that book, and it's about getting the right people in the right seats and getting positive people on that bus, and driving it forward and getting people that are on board for the mission. And that's where you get that extra energy from, to get up every morning and to recharge. uh, Eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. That's what we tell everybody. That'll get you up and going. You know, you've really highlighted through some pretty strong adversity there, in my opinion. And not only overcoming the obstacles, you're also overcoming um, kind of that viewpoint, from a political viewpoint, of a stigma that exists, and how you can work your way through that. And that should be something to all people, to be able to look at and say, anyone can do anything. Nothing's impossible. And that's really what I take out of this, is you're shattering things in front of you as you walk through and say, hey, I'm gonna break these barriers, and I'm gonna show people I can do it. And I think that's really honorable.
Yeah, I honestly, I think a lot of the courage comes from what my dad did. When you start over in a country and have to rebuild and figure it out, and it wasn't like he was successful immediately. I watched him get into business deals that didn't work out, and then we started over. And in my career, I've had to do that. I've had to walk away from positions where I thought, I'm not 100% for this. I'm not 100% for this cause. I will not be the best representative. And when you say no to a position, you go from a salary to zero. And I'm comfortable doing that because I genuinely think if you don't love what you do, it's not worth it. You know, you only get one life, and the only way to build and to give back is to always stay on the course. And it's very easy to get discouraged. But I've had a lot of individuals tell me I can't, and I'm honestly okay with it. For me, it's motivation to go back to them and say, I did it, and I want your support next time, and I want you to believe in me. But I've watched a lot of women who have been interested in politics shy away from it because it has been a man's game for very long. I mean, look at our history in Ohio. We have had one woman Speaker of the House, Speaker Joanne Davidson. She started an institute many, many years ago, motivating women to run. And I'm very thankful to have been in her leadership institute. But she has said this. That's where I got the line from, and it's accurate. Women are always asked to run, and I want to change that. I want to be somebody that a young girl can look up at, or even a young boy to say, I can do this. I can't, it's not an option for me. It's not how I was raised. So it really is perseverance. I've always had that.
That's awesome. Perseverance is very important to be successful in life, no matter what field you're working in. You've referenced your dad a couple times. You've referenced a couple other people. I'm really curious to dig in. Who are, whether it's your dad and you want to highlight more, who are leaders that you've looked up to and that you've been able to learn from that have helped mold you to be who you are today?
Well, I think you definitely caught on my dad. Absolutely. Um, he's a man of very few words, and I never knew if I was doing a good job or what he thought of me. And it's interesting. I knew a couple things just being around him for so many years: hard work, dedication, perseverance. And he knew that everything he was doing was to create opportunities for me. So I made sure that any opportunity I received, I didn't waste it. And so he's always been determined. He's always been hardworking. And I've always admired that about him. And I think that's where my grit comes from and perseverance. I want my family to be proud. They gave up way too much to come to this land of opportunity. So anything and everything I've done, I've always thought about what my dad would say and how he would receive the information. But he's been very influential, and he has never told me I can't do something. So he's always been in my corner. The other person I referenced, Speaker Joanne Davidson, I had the opportunity to meet her back in 2010 when I worked for the governor's office. And I asked her for a cup of coffee. She did not know me. I wasn't in her leadership institute at the time, but she spent a lot of time and years giving me advice, helping me grow, helping me mold. There were times when I said, Speaker, I don't want to do this job. I don't want to go to this agency or do this work. And she always told me to be thoughtful, um, understand that in every opportunity, there's something positive that I'm going to learn and grow from. And she motivated me in many ways to be a leader, to encourage other women to run for office. And she was extremely supportive when I ran. She also told me it was going to be an uphill battle, and she lost her first race. That was her advice to me. But she stood by me in ways that I'm always going to be thankful. And I'm always thinking, who are people in my life that I can motivate and give back to? So whether it's the middle schooler on my campaign who reaches out from time to time, or high schoolers, I've always taken the time in my day to make sure that I have those conversations, I share my background, and I can be an asset. And I would say the third person is somebody that I've always admired. Part of it is because we share a similar background, Nikki Haley. And I will always be indebted to her because I reached out to her during my run and asked if she would speak to me and give me some advice as I was going through some obstacles and challenges. And she not only made time for me, gave me advice, has developed and tried to guide me through the campaign, and reached out, and I reached out several times, and her team was just incredible to me. But she also made the time to speak to my husband, because when you run for office, it's a two-person decision. I can say 100% yes, but your spouse has to be just as prepared for what you're going to go through. And Ambassador Haley did not have to make that time for me at all. I mean, when I make this joke, I'm a dink. I'm nobody in politics, right? You start at the ground level. And for somebody with her background, expertise, to make that much time for a race like mine, I'll always be grateful. And it's a huge lesson for anybody in leadership to always give back, because you don't know who that person will be in the future. And those are the three probably that I can think of in terms of leadership and guiding me and molding me to who I am today.
Mehek, you've taken us through your entire journey through from your childhood to your career, through all the jobs you do. And to me, throughout this entire conversation, I've been so inspired, because it's incredible to hear someone at your stature to be so giving and generous and humble, to give back. And I've mentioned this before, but in a world today where there's so much chaos and negativity that's kind of preached on us, I truly appreciate your generosity and humility through your work and giving back to your community. So thank you for what you do for your community, and try to help make the small piece of the world that you can a better place, because we need more people like you in the world. So thank you.
I appreciate that. It's always been a privilege, and every opportunity I've been given.
Well, we don't want to take up any more of your time. We've gotten so much out of you, and it's been incredible to learn about your career and your journey. And thank you so much for joining us on the 3rd and 30 podcast. It couldn't have been a better conversation. I truly am inspired. I want to go. I don't know what I want to do. I want to go do something now. I want to go help someone or something. But thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us, Mehek. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.